Look closely at the people who have walked out of your life. Or better yet, look at the ones who treat your presence like an unread notification. You gave them your time, your absolute loyalty, and your immediate attention whenever they called, believing that consistency builds respect. Yet, the exact moment you stopped running to their rescue, they didn't stop to appreciate everything you had done. They simply found someone else to consume. This is not a failure of their morality, but a total failure of your strategy. Human nature obeys a terrifyingly cold mechanism. Nobody values what is handed out for free, but they will cross oceans and burn empires to secure what costs a fortune to reclaim. The tragedy of the modern empathetic individual is a systemic miscalculation of psychological worth. You have been trained by an idealistic society to believe that if you increase your warmth, your accessibility, and your openness, the world will return that energy with equal interest. So you leave your digital gates wide open, replying to text messages within 30 seconds, adjusting your weekend plans to accommodate a lukewarm friend, and explaining your decisions to people who have no right to question them. You believe this is love, or kindness, or maturity. In reality, you are flooding the market with your own supply. In the brutal economics of the human mind, when the supply of anything is infinite, the demand for it drops to absolute zero. You become oxygen, vitally essential for their survival when they are drowning, but entirely ignored the moment they step back onto dry land. Think about the last time someone truly disrespected you. Whether it was a subtle backhanded compliment disguised as humor or a deliberate boundary crossed in a professional setting. Your natural biological instinct was to correct them, to explain your point of view, or perhaps to display an outburst of raw emotion. You thought that by showing them your hurt or your logic, they would suddenly wake up and realize the error of their ways. But what actually happened? The air in the room grew cold. They looked at you with a hidden smirk, and your status plummeted. By engaging in the struggle, by attempting to explain your value, you implicitly accepted their courtroom. You allowed them to sit in the judge's chair while you stood in the defendant's box, pleading for a favorable verdict. The second you enter a defensive posture, you have already signaled to their subconscious that your territory can be violated with zero consequence. There's a profound, almost sinister law operating in social psychology that explains why some people can walk into a chaotic environment and command silent reverence without uttering a single syllable, while others scream for attention and receive nothing but mockery. This is the law of structural scarcity. The human mind is hardwired to associate difficulty with quality. If a resource is incredibly hard to obtain, if the barrier to entry is high, our cognitive mechanisms instantly assign it a massive premium. This isn't just about expensive luxury brands or rare pieces of art. It applies directly to the value of a human soul. When you make yourself rare, when your silence becomes heavier than your words, and when your access must be earned through consistent investment, you completely re-engineer the gravity of the room. You switch from a passive civilian trying to fit into someone else's script to a sovereign architect who controls the atmospheric conditions of their own life. To truly understand why people only value what costs a fortune to reclaim, we have to look beneath the surface of everyday etiquette and peer into the mechanics of cognitive dissonance and the sunk cost fallacy. When someone has to invest significant effort, emotional restraint, time, or social capital to remain in your orbit, their brain has to justify that expenditure. It creates an internal narrative that says, if I am working this hard to maintain this connection, this person must be incredibly valuable. Conversely, if they can ignore you for 3 weeks, show up at your doorstep with a low-effort excuse, and immediately receive your full attention, their brain registers a different equation. This person costs nothing, therefore they are worth nothing. They will continue to treat you like a discount commodity, because you have priced yourself exactly like one. You cannot blame a predator for treating you like prey if you walk through the forest wearing a costume made of wool. The illusion of accessibility is the single greatest trap that keeps highly intelligent, ambitious people stuck in loops of social exhaustion and emotional isolation. You want to be understood so badly that you lay out all your cards on the table, revealing your trauma, your dreams, and your internal vulnerabilities to anyone who gives you a passing glance. You think that transparency breeds intimacy, but in the arena of social dominance, transparency simply provides your opponents with the exact blueprint they need to dismantle your frame. A dangerous person, a person who commands ultimate respect, moves through the world like a shadow. They do not leak their intentions, they do not announce their moves, and they certainly do not offer explanations for their behavior. When they choose to withdraw their presence, they do it with a cold, surgical precision that leaves a gaping void in their wake. It is that precise void that forces the other party to look into the mirror and realize the true magnitude of what they have lost. Consider the dynamic of a failing relationship or a fading friendship, where one party begins to pull back, offering cold, disjointed text messages and distant glances. The typical human response is to panic, to chase, to send long paragraphs explaining how much you care, or to demand an explanation for the sudden shift in temperature. This behavior is driven by a deep psychological fear of abandonment, an evolutionary instinct designed to keep the prey animals safely within the herd. But the moment you chase, you validate their decision to leave. You prove to them that they are the prize, and you are the hunter who is desperate for a scrap of validation. If you want to flip the script, you must do the one thing that terrifies the ego of the manipulator. You must match their distance with absolute, frozen indifference. You do not argue. You do not yell, and you do not make a scene. You simply vanish from their emotional landscape, shutting down the tap of your attention so completely that the sudden drop in pressure makes them choke on the silence. This is where the concept of the fortune to reclaim truly manifests. When you withdraw your attention because your boundaries were compromised, that withdrawal must be final, permanent, and extraordinarily expensive to reverse. If a person can win you back with a simple text message or a half-hearted apology, the price of your dignity is still far too cheap. They must realize that to get back into your good graces, they have to sacrifice something of immense value: their pride, their comfort, their time, and their absolute submission to your new terms. They must feel the agonizing heat of the bridge you just burned, and they must understand that if they want to cross it again, they will have to build a new one with their own hands while you watch from the high fortress of your silence. If they are unwilling to pay that price, let them walk away into the fog of the mediocre masses, because a person who refuses to pay full price for your presence will always find a way to make you pay for their absence. Most people spend their entire lives running a script written by their parents, their peer groups, or the digital algorithms that dominate their screens. They are terrified of isolation, so they dilute their personality, nod when they disagree, smile when nothing is funny, and tolerate disrespect just to remain part of the collective. They have traded their claws for comfort and their teeth for social approval. But the true sovereign, the individual who has evolved through the hidden layers of cognitive intelligence, understands that wealth, power, and ultimate self-mastery require a fundamental fracture in this moral programming. You must become comfortable with the thin air of the peaks. You must be willing to look at a room full of people who dislike you and feel absolutely nothing but strategic curiosity. Your confidence should not be based on whether they love you. It must be based on the unshakable truth that you do not need their permission to exist. When you begin to implement this level of psychological tyranny over your own impulses, you will notice a disturbing, yet deeply satisfying shift in your immediate environment. The casual manipulators, the social parasites, and the high-conflict individuals who used to thrive on your emotional reactions will suddenly get incredibly angry. They will call you cold. They will call you arrogant. And they will tell everyone who will listen that you have changed. Do not flinch when you hear these whispers. This is the exact moment the systemic realization hits them. They can no longer push your buttons because you have disconnected the wires. Their anger is not a sign of your failure. It is the ultimate proof that your new price tag is far too high for their budget. They are realizing that their access to your energy has been permanently revoked, and the psychological cost of trying to manipulate you has become entirely unsustainable. True internal discipline is not just about going to the gym or waking up early. It is an act of calculated violence against your own psychological weakness. It is the ability to look at a toxic urge, the desire to check an ex of social media, the need to text someone who ignored you, or the impulse to defend your reputation against a fool, and bury that urge alive before it can dictate your actions. It means becoming an immovable object in a river of drifting social debris. While the masses are running around reacting to every minor trend, every digital outrage, and every emotional provocation, you remain perfectly still, observing the matrix of human behavior with a detached, clinical gaze. You see the strings attached to their limbs. You hear the desperation hidden beneath their loud voices, and you realize that the greatest weapon you possess is your absolute refusal to join their circus. Think of your life as an exclusive estate, not a public park. A public park is free, easily accessible, and open to anyone who wants to wander in, leave their trash on the grass, and walk away without consequence. An exclusive estate requires credentials, a rigorous screening process, and a massive investment just to cross the threshold. If you have spent the last few years treating your soul like a public park, do not be surprised when people treat you like dirt. Change the pricing structure today. Close the iron gates. Post the guards of your boundaries. And start saying no without offering a single word of context or justification. Let them wonder why you stopped showing up. Let them speculate about your silence. And let them feel the freezing cold of your sudden absence. The world does not reward the good employee, the accommodating friend, or the submissive partner who suffers in silence while waiting for a gold star from humanity. The world respects only one thing: leverage. And the ultimate form of leverage is the absolute willingness to walk away and never look back. When you reach a level of personal sovereignty where you genuinely do not care if a person stays or leaves, because your internal kingdom is so fortified and your purpose is so crystalline, you become functionally untouchable. You are no longer a leaf blowing in the wind of other people's opinions. You are the wind itself, dictating the terms of engagement and forcing the environment to adapt to your presence. As you step into this higher echelon of cognitive existence, remember that the path of the sovereign is a lonely one. The air is undeniably thinner at the top, and you will find it increasingly difficult to relate to your old social circle or participate in the shallow gossip that satisfies the average mind. Wealth, whether it is financial, psychological, or spiritual, isolates before it liberates. You must ask yourself if you are truly ready for that level of silence. Most people aren't. They would rather remain poor, understood, and safely nestled within the herd than be powerful, wealthy, and standing entirely alone in the storm. But if you have listened closely to the underlying mechanics of this reality, it means you suspect deep down that you were not built for the sheep pen. You were built for the hunt. Stop giving out free samples of your soul to people who belong in the clearance section of human behavior. Force them to pay the absolute maximum price for a fraction of your attention, and if they cannot afford it, let them stand outside the gates and watch your ascent from a distance. The throne of your mind is waiting for you to grow massive enough to fill it. Drop the victim script. Erase the need for validation. Step into the cold path of absolute discipline and become the rarest, most expensive entity in your world. Let them whisper, let them fear, and let them realize too late that once they lose your respect, it will cost them a fortune they do not possess to ever reclaim it.